And we are back with another week of Nansen Alpha Leaks. Alex, how you doing this week?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I am doing great as always. Watching the markets go up, watching the markets go down. Every week's a new adventure.
Absolutely.
Hello to everyone in the chat. Feel free to type in where you're dialing in from. And as always, feel free to ask any questions and we'll try and get to them throughout the call. Maybe let's kick off with the new labels that we just rolled out. Right now we're focusing, so the kind of phase one of Nansen Labels was focusing on quantity. We wanted to really chip into the entire universe of wallets out there, and we've covered around 65 million wallets so far. But now we're kind of transitioning into more of a quality phase. So maybe you can walk us through that, some of the new stuff we're rolling out.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's completely right. The philosophy from the beginning with Nansen was that we wanted to expand very quickly and make sure that we had good coverage of the whole blockchain effectively. But we knew we would get to a point where actually we'd have multiple labels for many of the addresses, and it would become pretty messy. And in fact, some people have also commented on how it can be confusing when you see multiple different labels for the same address. So one thing that we've rolled out now is basically it's a different way to display labels, which we're quite excited about because we think it's a big upgrade. So in the tables where you would normally see sort of pipe separated labels, you now see just one label for each address, and you also have some emojis to help you visually recognize what these different addresses are. So, for example, Binance One just means that it's one of the main wallets that Binance controls. It used to have several different repetitive labels like Binance One, Binance, Exchange, etc., etc. And now it's much cleaner, where you can just see Binance One, and it has this little sort of bank icon to indicate that it's an exchange. And similarly, with something like SushiSwap, you see this is the Wi-Fi wrapped Ether market, and it has two icons. The first is an exchange because it's also a type of exchange, but it's a decentralized exchange. So it has a little robot icon as well to indicate that it's a contract. And you can actually see multiple different exchanges here, looking at the top balance changes of Wi-Fi tokens in the last 7 days. And I think there should be some other icons here, like this one, which is this little person with glasses, indicating someone who's very smart. And so that's a smart money label, which I think we'll get back to again. We've talked about smart money a couple of times before, but we feel like this is a big upgrade because it just visually makes it easier to see what's happening instead of having to read like very long strings of labels. And then in addition, we've rolled out some new behavioral wallet labels that make it easier to also distinguish the different wallets from each other. So you see, for example, Token Millionaire, which indicates that this is an address that owns at least $1 million worth of tokens. And then this is to contrast a bit with the labels that you know and love, like Casual Dex Trader, Medium Dex Trader, and so on. So there's now going to be a bit more variety in the labels that you see. You see also ETH Millionaire, which means they have at least $1 million in ETH. And what we do when we have multiple labels is that we surface what we think is the most informative for each address. So I'm not going to go too much into the details about that, but that's the philosophy that we're adopting going forward. In the relatively near future, you will also be able to hover over these different addresses, and you'll see if there are multiple labels, just so you get the full picture right away. And you'll also, of course, be able to drill down into the wallet profilers and see a list of all the labels we have when you have multiple labels. So this is pretty cool. And you can see the top balances for Wi-Fi, for example, completely random example. You see a lot of smart contracts like the governance contract. You see Aave's lending pool. You see Maker and their Wi-Fi contract. which actually now is the third largest holder of Wi-Fi. And then you see these different exchanges down here, and even some smart money like Polychain, which is a well-known crypto fund. So that's kind of high level what we are doing with the labels. And we're going to be rolling these out across different dashboards, kind of slowly rolling them out. I think most of the most popular dashboards already have these new tokens, but definitely let us know what you think. If you think this is, an improvement, if you think we're taking away too much data, if you'd like to see something displayed in different ways, we're always happy to get your feedback on that.
A couple follow-up questions from that. So number one is, if people are curious about kind of what the new labels mean, where can they find descriptions of that?
Great question. So what you can do is you can go to docs.nansen.ai, and this will show our documentation, which is growing. So it's pretty short at the moment, to be honest. But you can click on this link, which says wallet labels, what do they mean? Because it's a common question, right? What do the different labels mean? And so here we're going to be compiling basically all the labels that are not directly understandable just from reading the label. And so maybe billionaire is something you'd understand, but for example, that's when you have a combined ETH and token balance of at least $1 billion US. That's a billionaire. Binance deposit is probably quite obvious, but that's a deposit address for a specific Binance user, and so on and so forth. Casual DEX trader is like something a lot of people ask about, but that's someone who's made between 1 and 10 trades on decentralized exchanges. So this is where you go. Just go to docs.nansen.ai, and then you'll see this link to wallet labels. What do they mean? And this is going to be expanding. It's going to be growing with the set of labels that we have continuously.
Next question about this is, we got a question in the chat about searching wallets by label or wallet name. What is kind of I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but what is the philosophy around that? And maybe when are you thinking of rolling something like that out, if at all?
Yeah, we don't really have that at the moment. I think what we'll probably do is to create what we have called roll out this notion of an entity. And so an entity would be, for example, Binance. And so instead of you inputting Binance and getting like 2.5 million wallets listed on your screen, you'll instead get an aggregate over that entity, and you'll see activity for that entity, but aggregated across all their different wallets. So I don't think we're going to have sort of a direct lookup for Binance and then just get a list of all the addresses, because that's not really convenient. Instead, we're probably going to have more of these entity features where you can just get a drop down of all the entities we have in our database, and you get like an overall sort of executive summary of that entity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then another question is, maybe we can just brainstorm a bit out loud here about like new labels and new heuristics and kind of how we come up with them. And then, present this idea to the listeners here or anyone who watches this in the future, this kind of idea of, if you have any thoughts around heuristics for labeling wallets, we're always open to hear them, and they can potentially be baked into our dashboards. So as like a starting point here, maybe we can talk a little bit about like how we thought through some of these new labels, what we thought was valuable in them, not necessarily like specific details, but like what goes into a wallet label when we're developing them from scratch.
Yeah. So the term wallet label is quite broad, right? It actually encompasses like several things. Entities, which I think, that's maybe self-explanatory, but things like, real world entities like Binance, Maker, Aave, and so on. That's one thing. So that, I guess the question is more about the behavioral labels or the categories that we, for example, have with casual DEX trader, token millionaire, and so on. And we've spent quite a lot of time thinking about this and testing out different things in this experimental sandbox that we have. And we tried some things that were more complex, like things like doing segmentation across several different behavioral dimensions. In practice, though, it often becomes quite confusing if you try to sort of distill down multi-dimensional segments into just one simple label. So effectively, the solution that we came up with was that we figured, let's just have these relatively intuitive dimensions, things like balance, right? Volume, so that has to do with activity, which I'm not sure you can see that here, but there are some that are listed as high activity. Frequency of trades, like how much they trade, right? And many other things like that, casual dex trader and so on. So what we, the direction we decided to take was to keep this pretty simple, and then instead make sure that we have good ways to surface, what is the most informative and interesting label. And so when other people want to make suggestions for labels, now is actually a really good time, because we have a pretty good way to surface the most informative labels, and that means we can be much more liberal in adding lots of different labels on the same address. Mm-hmm. So you'll be able to go in Wallet Profiler and see, this is Binance, and here's like all these behavioral labels that describes Binance. So if you have ideas around certain niche behavioral attributes, like is this a multi-sig creator, or is it even a particular multi-sig like Gnosis safe creator? Mm-hmm. Or is it someone who creates liquidity pools? I mean, we actually have some labels for these things already, but basically anything that is detectable on chain we can do relatively easily. And even stuff that is not detectable on chain, of course, we can do as well in some cases, like the funds and the entities and so on. But those aren't implemented as heuristics. Those are implemented through research, which I'll actually show an example of a bit later with the ETH2 deposits at the end of the session.
Yeah. Another example of like a label request that we recently received was in our smart money, with our new smart money labels. Someone was talking about how like certain signals are only valuable if it's a delta neutral or delta one trader. So like a delta neutral would be someone who is like hedging out their positions. They're not really taking directional exposure. And then a delta one trade would be like if they're actually taking directional exposure. And they were saying basically like if a delta neutral trader has certain assets in their wallet. So for example, like when Alameda had they had a significant amount, or they had borrowed a significant amount of YFI, and everyone on crypto Twitter was losing their minds. You can't really guess at what they're doing, because they could be running any number of strategies that are delta neutral. So they might not actually be shorting, or they might not actually have exposure there. So the label request was basically like, how can we filter out those delta neutral traders and really just look at the subset of users that are taking directional risk? And that is more indicative because, for example, if that subset of users starts buying a bunch of stablecoins or stablecoin equivalents, of which would be like AUSDC or CUSDC or something like that, then you can assume that they're de-risking and like buying stablecoins so that they're not exposed to market risk as much anymore. So that would be an example there. And if anyone has any ideas like that, we're always happy to brainstorm them and find out what's feasible and what we can look into on chain and do at scale.
I think the best way is always to think, what do you want to see in the platform? And then we can try to figure out a way to actually get it done.
Yeah. Okay. And then here's a question from the chat. Mike has asked about a label for early yield farmers. I think this is a great one.
Cool.
So basically labeling addresses that have been within farms, like top farms within the first 12 hours or maybe whatever, 24 hours. And yeah, this is a great example, Alex, that you're pulling up here. We do somewhat do this for YFI, which is one of the notable farms. We haven't ported this flow over to any of the other farms, but Alex, maybe you can touch on this a little bit.
Yeah. So this is again one area where we were kind of limited by our old label display. And actually, you can see it here. There's an example of how labels have been displayed in our dashboard so far, right? You have like this list of all the labels, which sounds kind of silly, but that's the way we had it, and there wasn't really any good way to surface what's the one wallet label you want to show. And so the consequence of that is that you can't just add tons of different labels, because you clutter the screen very heavily. And so now adding a label for everyone who has farmed Wi-Fi, even perhaps like the ordering of it, would be pretty easy for us to do. So if you want us to add that, we can do it. We already have, I think we have the first 10 we've just manually added. So you can see in the top Wi-Fi farmers, you see, for example, first Wi-Fi farmer, sixth Wi-Fi farmer, and so on. So you still see like the top or the first 10, and you can also see them in the Wi-Fi dashboard, which is pro.nansen.ai/Wi-Fi. You can also see these early Wi-Fi farmers, visually, where you basically just see the time on the x-axis. So this is when they started farming, and this is in total how much they claimed through Wi-Fi farming. So this guy up here was the first Wi-Fi farmer, and they farmed 1,313 Wi-Fi in total. So yeah, I like that suggestion. I'm happy to commit to. Actually, maybe I should ask back though. Would you want to have like all of these addresses tagged as Wi-Fi farmer, or just like the first 100 or something like that? Let's see.
Yeah, that's a good question. If it should be time based, like a 12 hours, or it should be like number based, like top 50 or first 50 or first 100 or something. Mike, feel free to answer in the chat.
Yeah, I guess it might be relative to which project we're talking about. Like basically everyone who farmed Wi-Fi was kind of early in the context of Wi-Fi. Of course, the very earliest people got most of the yields relative to how much they locked up. But like the first 24 hours, for example, that's like early enough. Or in some cases, something is so incredibly anticipated that you really only care about who was in the first like 1 or 2 hours.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps up the labels discussion. Okay, Mike says time-based, especially for most recent new farms. Okay, noted. We'll take that back to the drawing board and figure out how we can incorporate that. But okay, so wrapping up the labels discussion, this lasted longer than I expected, but I think we covered some interesting stuff here. Now I think we can dive in on an example. I think we covered some of this last week, but there's new farms this week, so we can go over a similar workflow of how to discover new farms and do some due diligence on them. And we'll go over some kind of pro user workflows here where you can get maximum information by looking into some of these new farms. So let me just share my screen here.
We're going to swap roles here, right? So I'm going to be the facilitator. So
yes.
Now I'm going to be taking the questions and try to relay them on to Daniel.
Go easy on me. All right. So I think an example we can go through this week is Badger DAO. This, as always, this is not an endorsement. Do your own research, but Badger DAO was somewhat in the zeitgeist this week because they did an airdrop on a bunch of people, and like it was based on if you were a Wi-Fi governance participant, if you did things with WBTC, and so they airdropped on a bunch of people, and you just went to their site and claimed it. So today we'll kind of go through some of the on-chain data that explains what happened and maybe what is going to happen. You can make some predictions based on that. So starting off, I think probably an interesting one to look into here is something like the top depositors. So right now on Badger DAO, they have this pool 2, which is incentivized. And we talked about this last time, but a pool 2 is basically like when you're taking directional exposure on like a liquidity pool, and usually it includes the reward token. So in this case, the pool 2 is the Uniswap WBTC Badger pool. They also have, there's another pool for Badger wrapped ETH, but clearly the WBTC Badger one is larger. So real quick here, we'll pull up the top depositors. And so the top depositors takes the Uniswap liquidity pool token. And here you see some of our new labels that will probably filter out over time. We're doing some debugging on that. And you see Badger deposited in this pool. And just real quick, you know, we'll when this loads, we'll click through a little bit and see if there's any big names that pop out. I actually haven't done this, so I'm not sure if there's anything. So beachbum.eth.
You see Alameda there.
Oh, is Alameda there? Oh yeah, there you go. So Alameda is staking, or like is providing liquidity for this, which is interesting. And so kind of the signal there isn't like, you know, okay, Alameda's in this buy, but at the very least, it's kind of like, okay, smart money is looking at Badger DAO. They haven't completely dismissed it. They didn't immediately sell their token. So maybe something is going on there. Alameda again in another wallet. That's pretty interesting. Okay, so that's kind of like, so the takeaway there is when you see these liquidity pools, you can just scroll over to the right and pull up top depositors. What else can we look at here? So the other thing to look at is when there's a contract that distributes tokens, like reward tokens to people, and all of these in Badger DAO are contracts that are sending tokens to people, or at least they all hold Badger, clearly. Like for example, this one holds 7.75 million Badger. I've looked through these before, and actually I think it was basically the wallet that gave me the airdrop. I found it, and it was actually this one. So I'll show a different dashboard that we don't, that it's kind of a newer dashboard. I think not as many people use it, but you come over here and you pull up Etherscan to get the address of the contract up here. And we've got a dashboard called Top Recipients. And so on Top Recipients, basically you put in the contract address, and then you get the contract address for the token. So if you come on CoinGecko, you can just copy it here. You can also do it straight from Etherscan, but I just know that it's easy to get it here. And then you plug in the token address. And basically what we'll be looking at here is what addresses this contract has sent to. And that'll tell us who got airdropped this token when it loads. And so then, okay, so here we see Alameda got airdropped 30,000. This is just on one of their wallets. And like the likely explanation there is, you know, they did a ton with WBTC, either Alameda or FTX, but basically they're doing a lot with WBTC. Alameda again, Beach Bum again. So this is interesting because, you know, the people that we saw who are staking in the WBTC pool are people who got airdropped a pretty large amount. So probably the logic there was like, oh, I just got gifted. So it's roughly like $5 a token. I just got gifted 150K, may as well make the most of it. So Alameda's in here, 3 arrows. And you can kind of just like go through here and see who received a large airdrop. So there's that. And I think another thing when you see some of these, so remember that we're looking at like the main pool 2 here is the WBTC Badger pool 2. And some people, in order to everyone has different strategies, but one thing that some people do when participating in a pool too is they'll actually borrow part of the asset or like part of the pair. So one thing that I thought of when we saw that there was a WBTC Badger pool is, are people actually borrowing more WBTC? And so to check that, you can come on our Aave dashboard, and then we've got laid out at the bottom here the utilization of all the different lending pools on Aave. And so we care here about the WBTC one. And really what we're just checking here is, are people borrowing more WBTC on Aave? And so if we look back November 30th, roughly around 6%, maybe around 7%. And then when Badger comes out earlier this week, we see a spike in utilization. Not a spike. I mean, it's these scales are kind of small, but you see an increase at the very least in WBTC utilization. So it's around like 12 to 13%. So there's not necessarily a direct link here, but this is kind of just a way of validating that something's going on with WBTC because more people are borrowing it. So what else here?
Maybe to add to that, like another way to drill deeper on that would be to go into token god mode for WBTC and maybe look at the balance changes to see if there's funds flowing out of Aave, and if there's funds flowing into Badger, for example. That could be an indication that that's what's happening.
Great idea. That
the good thing about these flows is that they don't necessarily tell you the direct connection, right? But that's because funds don't always flow just directly between wallet A and wallet B, right? They might go through lots of different intermediaries. They might go through exchanges, et cetera, et cetera. So it's still quite useful to just look at net balance changes. And then if you want to sort of figure out, are there any direct transactions from A to B, you can still look at the largest transactions and see if you spot any trends there.
So are you saying we should look at top transactions here, or
I would start with balance changes and then just see, if you sort by the change there.
Mm-hmm.
If you click the change, yeah, there you go. So okay, the largest outflow is actually from Aave. So that if WBTC is flowing out of Aave, everything else equals, that means utilization goes up, right? Because the percentage of how much tokens are flowing out. And if you click it again, the change, you'll see it flipped around. And do you see anything going in there? Well, you see Badger there. Yeah. So 160.
Yeah. So the numbers don't really add up. So maybe my theory on the Aave utilization was off. But yeah.
This is a good way to test those hypotheses, though, right? So you can actually work it out and see if there's any connection. It looks like most of it actually went to Curve, and some of it was actually redeemed. That's the zero address, that's kind of strange, actually, because, and we're kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but I'm tempted to have a look at the Wrap Bitcoin dashboard as well, because maybe there's a new thing here where like Wrap Bitcoin minting doesn't just grow infinitely as it has been the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe now people are actually starting to redeem them again. And yeah, looks like that, right? Yeah. So Wrap Bitcoin peaked this November 26th, or that's kind of in itself.
Late November or whatever. Yeah, late November. It is interesting that there's kind of these. Oh, this isn't Maker, but there's kind of these little spikes. I wonder honestly what that could indicate. I mean, if you're taking your money off of or like unwrapping your Bitcoin, is that to send it back to an exchange, or what? Do you have any theories on that?
Great question. I mean, could it be to, I mean, I guess it means either they're literally just cashing out, like selling Bitcoin, or it could mean that they have, better use for it elsewhere. Like arbing the, what is it called? Grayscale Bitcoin product or something like that. There might be other use cases for it where you actually just are able to make more money off of it. But yeah, it'd be interesting to do kind of a deep dive on this at some point.
Interesting.
Because that is definitely like a change in trend, because it's been, you know, growing exponentially and now seems to have slowed down. So it's funny how you can just like discover stuff like this by just poking around in Nansen.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of what this could mean. All right.
Yeah, so I think we got a question here. Oh, okay. No, it's more like just a comment on great job on the platform. Andrew presented it. I guess it's Andrew Kang. Presented it sometime back while in beta, and the puzzle is getting solved as time passes. I guess it gets easier to use as you use it more. It's true. It's not the easiest product to use at first, but I think a lot of people learn to really love it as they get into it. But we are trying to make it a bit easier to use. And I can say there's definitely going to be a Nansen 2.0 coming out sometime early next year.
Yeah. One other thing I'll just demonstrate real quick before we wrap up the Badger discussion. This is a very much in alpha feature, but this is a smart money token profiler. So it takes our smart money subset of people and looks at just their wallets for a token profiler. So still needs to be debugged a little bit, but you can see like token transfers of smart money addresses. So this is what smart money is doing with Badger. And here we see Alameda providing that 16,000 Badger to the WBTC Badger pool that we saw earlier.
Yeah.
Likely in here, you'd also be able to see smart money selling or staking or doing something like that. Like this is probably them staking in pool 1 or something like that, or maybe redeeming collecting the rewards from a pool 1 or whatever is going on. Like feel free to do your own research on this, but
I think
this is a new
also, I think I'm going to take as a note to see if we can label up some of those top Badger contracts, because they should be labeled as like staking or whatever they are. There was a comment here by Dennis, which was good. So Curve large deposits could still be for Badger. Badger Farm takes Curve BTC LP tokens. So that could explain that. Maybe your theory was right. It's just that it doesn't go into the Uniswap, it goes into the Curve pool.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that actually could make sense. I think there's lower risk in doing the Curve one. So okay, I'll take that win.
Previous crowdcasts are available. Yes, they are. You can watch these office hours or crowdcasts on our YouTube. So just search for Nansen or Nansen AI on YouTube. Maybe I can actually see if I find the link, so you don't have to search for it, and you can see the past crowdcasts there. Let's see. Here we go. This page.
Did you say outcast or crowdcast?
I tried to say crowdcast. Yeah, now my YouTube is acting up.
Also, if you just go to the crowdcast and you go to my link, so if you go to nansen.ai/office-hours, it'll link you to crowdcast, and you can see directly on crowdcast our past ones.
Cool.
Yeah, the YouTube as well works.
Yeah, interesting. I think actually there might be a bug with YouTube, or maybe something wrong with my YouTube account. But I'm going to try to look that up in the background anyway, so that you can get the link.
Yeah,
because we want to get more subscribers.
Tell your friends. We're starting a vlog.
I got the link there.
Okay, perfect.
There you go. You can go to that and hit the subscribe button. Click the little bell or whatever people say, and then you will get notifications for new videos coming out as well.
Yeah. So that kind of wraps up an example of using our platform for discovering and doing due diligence on new farms. What else do you want to cover today, Alex?
So I was thinking we could touch base on the ETH2 status, because there's a lot of staking providers that are scrambling to, I think many staking providers like staking pools, exchanges, and so on, they didn't expect the milestone to be hit for the Beacon chain actually launching. So I think a lot of them are actually scrambling now to get their shit together so that people can actually use them. And so we're trying to keep an eye on the different staking pools and providers. And there was something that popped up that I found interesting. Let's see. Am I sharing my screen now?
Yep.
Cool. So this is the ETH2 deposit contract dashboard, which just monitors how much Ether is being deposited into this ETH2 contract. And so, you know, it's growing still. More than 1 million Ether has now been deposited, which comes from almost 3,500 unique depositors and more than 40,000 unique validators now on the Beacon chain. But what I wanted to show was this here, which we are working on fleshing out even more, but we are actually attributing the Ether to entities, known entities, and many of them are staking providers. So the largest provider, as far as we know, is Staked. So I think that's staked.us. They're not like sponsoring this video or anything. This is just the data. And also the interesting thing is Kraken is a big depositor now because of their clients depositing through their staking service. And in fact, when I looked this up, I found that they put out a press release, which I think came out yesterday, December 8th, which says that clients deposit over 100K Ether on Kraken's new Ethereum 2.0 staking service. And you can actually see that here. And so we think, I mean, we haven't spoken to anyone in Kraken directly, but we think we've found their wallets and 100, almost 120,000 Ether now is what it looks like that they have. So, you know, even if it's less than that, they're still going to be the second largest entity that we have been able to map out, which has deposited Ether to this deposit contract. And the other ones would be Bitcoin Swiss, which is not too far behind Kraken. They were a very early depositor to the ETH2 deposit contract. Stakefish, Cream, and also Staker. And we're going to get more coverage on these staking pools. And many of them are actually launching in the next couple of weeks. So this is going to be really interesting to see how this develops over time and how decentralized it's actually going to become also at the provider level.
Yeah. One quick note on this, just because there are, I think we've probably mentioned this before, but just on the anti-doxing, the only reason we have like names of individuals on these is because they've announced it publicly in the past, but we don't, and like this is linked to a public ENS address or something like that. But we don't typically label individuals in other situations. What is kind of the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Lately, we've also had a couple of, I'd say, relatively high-profile investors and traders who actually want to be labeled. So we do have some examples of people just, you know, who are Nansen users or Nansen customers, and, you know, they're happy to just say, you know, feel free to label these addresses. I'm the owner of them, and it's pretty easy for us to test if they are indeed the owners of them. So, you know, if anyone wants to be labeled in Nansen, like, feel free. And it doesn't have to be, obviously it doesn't have to be your name. It could be just some kind of pseudonymous identity that you have, which we have many examples of. I just want to show one thing that sorry, go ahead.
We should do a competition. We should have a, people can submit their ENS address and get entered into kind of like a America's Got Talent or like Nansen's Got Smart or something like that. And people can compete on who gets the most or like the highest P&L over a certain period of time.
Yeah, so this kind of leads us back to the smart money dashboard, which we have, this is the third time we show it. And we have, since last time, we've actually started rolling it out to customers. So we figured that if you're watching the stream now live and you're a Nansen customer, you can reach out to us on Discord and we will give you access to this early version of smart money, you know, with the big fat disclaimer that it is an alpha. So, you know, we're going to make changes to it. There might be some errors, but we want to get your feedback. And since you're watching the stream, we figured, you know, it'd be nice to give you that little gift. So feel free to ping either myself or Daniel on Discord. Probably best to do Daniel because of the time zone. I'm about to log off. And then just send him your email, which you use for your Nansen account, and we'll basically activate alpha access to smart money for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was one thing I wanted to show here. And so, I mentioned smart money because like many of these people, they are happy to get labeled because they want to be in the smart money dashboards, which is that's cool. But I noticed one thing. I don't know if it's still here now. It might have passed too much time. Oh, there we go. I noticed this, which I found pretty funny. Vitalik Buterin trading Trump futures or Trump prediction markets. That was pretty funny. So, and he's actually trading yes Trump token or yes Trump token for no Trump. So I guess he's basically arbing somehow. Like, yeah, I found that pretty funny. So that's the kind of stuff you can discover when playing around with smart money.
What so this is a balancer pool, but is that, I think these tokens are traded on like Catnip exchange or something like that. Do you remember?
I don't know, but they're also traded on other decentralized exchanges, I would imagine. They're just tokens, right? So they can be passed around and traded anywhere. So I guess there are markets for them. I mean, we could drill down into the actual transaction. And, Vitalik's actually labeled on Etherscan too. But it's, unless you're actually sitting there watching his address, it's not so easy to detect stuff like this. And it was 12 hours ago, and he was making the trade. Oh, okay, yeah, he was making the trade with the DAI Y Trump, N Trump, yes Trump, no Trump. Okay, so it's actually a three-way split balancer pool in this, and then he makes the trade from yes to no.
Interesting.
Yeah, I did see him tweeting something about these Trump prediction markets not too long ago. So it's fun to see him actually interacting with them in the real world too.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I don't know if we have anything else too huge to cover. So maybe we can start wrapping up a bit earlier this week. What do you think? Is there anything else that you'd like to cover this week?
No, I think that's it. We got through a lot of stuff relatively quickly. Maybe we can give people a last chance if they have any questions. Let's see what people are saying.
In the chat, Mike makes a good comment, which is that just because someone is a large holder of a coin is not necessarily bullish. They could have received it from an ICO or a pre-sale or something like that, and those are the early buyers who are just ready to dump on you. So be careful there.
Yeah, that's a great point. Certainly, it's not unambiguously a good thing if someone holds a lot of tokens, especially if those tokens can be dumped at any time. There's no vesting or anything like that. One thing that I did notice when you were showing the Badger dashboard, or the smart money drill down on Badger, and they had 0 balances. I think that's just because they received the Badger tokens and immediately staked them or sold them or something like that. So it looked like there was an error, but it's probably just because they received it and then right away shipped them out.
Yeah. On the top recipients, maybe it'll be difficult to just talk about this without having it up, but I won't screen share right now. On the top recipients, there's the incoming column and then there's the outgoing column.
Yeah.
Could you explain that? Actually, and while you do that, I'll pull it up in the background.
Yeah. So top recipients, the way I think about this is that it's kind of a relative balance. It actually shows in net terms how much tokens you have received from the sender address. So when you see incoming, that means how many tokens have you received from this Badger contract? And then the outgoing would show how much tokens you sent back to the contract. And now with an airdrop, there's no reason why you would send Badger tokens back to the airdrop contract. So they're going to be 0 for all of them. But I think one point of confusion here, which we discussed previously, was that it might look like, hey, are these addresses, are you saying that none of them sent those tokens anywhere else? And that's not what it's showing. It just shows the relationship between the addresses in the list and the main address, the main sender address.
Here's an idea for a potential dashboard that we could do. Basically extending this dashboard where we have maybe sender address, token address. So it would be, whoever is sending it to you, the token that you're receiving, and then where it goes after that, kind of like a next step to this dashboard, so that we could see something like, X amount of Badger was sent to the pool 2, or like the Uniswap pool, Y amount was sent to Curve, or I don't even know necessarily for like a generalized example, but like that could be interesting to just see what people do.
100%. The tricky thing, there's a couple of tricky things, but like one of them is that they don't always go directly, right? So you could go through like intermediary wallets, but then they eventually end up somewhere. So that can be, a bit complicating, a bit of a complicating factor. And then the other thing, because we actually did this some other places. So I think for, did we do this for? Yeah, I think we did this here. So actually, let me share my screen as well. Let's see. In the Wi-Fi dashboard, so we tried to do something like this, which shows top Wi-Fi recipients from farmers. So that's kind of what you are thinking about, right?
Yeah.
It's going like, where did the farm tokens actually go? And the top one is actually Yearn governance.
Yeah.
And then another one is the YAM Wi-Fi pool. That's the second biggest one. And then there's the balancer exchange proxy, which I think means that they're actually just dumping the tokens or trading them. And then there's Uniswap. There's another, I think, guess this was a pool 2 or something like that. So you can kind of get an idea of what was happening here. But this is also, I think, in gross terms. So it's just, if you circled, for example, tokens, through Balancer, you were trading, lots of it went there, Balancer would rise to the top, if you understand what I mean. So there's kind of a distinction between net and sort of gross amounts going to specific wallets, which can make it a bit misleading sometimes. So yeah, I think this is definitely something we should look at, but it is not trivial to get it right.
Yeah. Is it possible to parse what contract action is taken? So for example, if someone is staking on Uniswap, like in the Uniswap pool, versus selling on a Uniswap pool, could we just have like the destination and the action?
Yes. Yeah, we could have that. Yeah. It's like not trivial, because the space of actions could be very large. Not all, you would have to either map the actions to some kind of like universal language of actions,
right,
or you would just spell them out like they are based on the event names, like swap or trade or exchange, and then you'll see it there. So I think, for DEXs, it would be ideal to actually have some kind of standard where you can distinguish between liquidity provisioning and dumping. That's like a big distinction, right? So I'd favor the approach where we try to actually just create this sort of universal or standard language that distinguishes between trades and liquidity provisioning before we do that.
Yeah. Or we can just toss in a column for emojis based on for that standard one. So like dumping would be a little poop emoji, and staking would be something else, maybe like the flying money, the flying dollar bill emoji.
So the dumping is the poop emoji.
Yeah,
and then,
exactly.
and then water is the liquidity provisioning.
Oh, maybe that works better. All right. All right. Well, I think that's probably a good place to start wrapping it up. I don't see any additional questions in the chat, but some parting notes is, as always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to message us on Discord. After today, feel free to message myself or Alex regarding getting access to the Smart Money Alpha dashboard. Follow us on Twitter at Nansen_AI, or follow myself or Alex. We're pretty active over there. And is there anything else, Alex?
Nope. Remember to check out the YouTube link in the chat there, so you can subscribe us. But that's pretty much it. So hopefully some of you will be interested in trying out the smart money dashboard. So let's see how many DMs Daniel gets after this.
They're flooding in. They're flooding in already. All right, guys. See you all next week. Thank you for joining us today.
Take care.
Bye.